So I'm going to be talking about your personal information in the next 10 minutes, a day's worth condensed a little bit, and specifically why you should be caring about your personal information, a little bit about what Google does to protect your personal information, and then what you, yes you, can do to protect your own personal information even better. So a little bit about myself. My name's Emily Metcalfe. I'm a security engineer at Google. I've been in the industry about 10 years now, almost 6 years at Google. I've done a lot of privacy teaching, hundreds of Googlers in 8 different offices. This is actually a picture of me and the Hyderabad, India office, where I did some teaching. And I'm also a co-founder and leader in the Transit Google group, a subsidiary of the Gayglers, our LGBT employee group. Shout out to the Gayglers in the audience. And I'm giving this talk because I feel very strongly about people and their personal information, and that when you give out your personal information, you really should understand why people are collecting it, where it's going, and how it's being used. I also know that this is a subject that when some issue goes wrong with respect to privacy, that it can disproportionately affect folks in underrepresented minority groups, LGBT people, people of color, survivors of domestic violence. I can go on and on. So this is something that's particularly relevant, I feel, to a lesbians who tech audience. There's been a lot of headlines in the last couple of years about data protection, user data, and privacy. And while I won't get into all of them, suffice it to say that in today's information age, while information can do a lot of really amazing things and help a lot of amazing startups and companies do awesome things to improve everyone's lives, it is something that can be a little bit dangerous if not handled correctly. So I want to definitely have an open dialogue about personal information, and hopefully can tell you more about how to protect it and how Google protects your data. The scope of data has also really been increasing in the last couple of years. 20 years ago, when you were talking about data protection, we were talking more about protecting credit card numbers and passwords, maybe your mother's maiden name, things like that. But today, people's livelihoods are really in a lot of their personal data. So, and because identity thieves and other folks with not so great intentions will use whatever information is out there to try to gain access to yours, we really do want to be as careful as we can, I think, with personal information. So having said all that and set the tone for the talk, you might want to ask, how should your personal data really be kept private? The answer, carefully and thoroughly. And because Google's lawyers and policy folks are really awesome and have approved some of these slides, I'm going to give you a little peek into what's going on behind the scenes, or at least as much as I could fit into about 5 minutes before I want to get to the third part of my talk. So first of all, this is the data lifecycle. It starts all the way at the beginning, before any product even receives data, is when we're creating products. Whenever a Google product is in design, we go through a couple of different stages, including privacy design docs, where engineers or product managers write down what data is being collected, how is it going to be used, where is it going to be stored, kind of like the who, what, where, when, and why of the data. All of that is reviewed by a privacy working group that makes sure that everything is being done according to Google's privacy principles. And depending on the scope of the project and the sensitivity of the data being collected, it might get some additional reviews or code audits by a privacy engineering team, a dedicated privacy engineering team that knows some of the bugs and potential issues that can come up when you're processing very sensitive user data. Once a product is launched, a user can choose to give it data. And when receiving the data, we really need to be careful and always be on the lookout for any sort of vulnerabilities, 0 days, or other issues with, especially with encryption. Google's been making a solid push to have more and more of our connections be over HTTPS or encrypted by default. We also give users a lot of control over their personal data. Have any of you been to the Google My Account settings page? Anyone in the audience? Wow, that's actually a lot of you. You have a lot more control over at least some of your data than you might think. I say some because there is some that you don't really have a choice over whether it's collected or not, but for what you do have control over, Google does try to do that. I'm going to skip a little bit about storing data just in the interest of time, but TLDR encryption is something that's being done behind the scenes on multiple layers in order to keep it safe. We also have a lot of technology that goes behind the scenes as far as both access control to make sure only the intended audience has access to it, as well as monitoring those accesses. If it's your data that we're talking about, like you uploaded a cat picture, you should be able to access that. And when you log into your Google account, behind the scenes, there's going to be a data access token that's used and passed around between different systems to make sure that only you or people who you've granted access to are going to be able to gain access to your picture or whatever piece of data it is. So if Leanne shares a picture from Lesbians Who Tech with me that's only view permissions, I wouldn't be able to delete or edit it like an access token for my own data would permit me to do. There are also some times when Googlers, in terms of their regular work, do come across user data in order to fix problems, such as if an app isn't downloading correctly or something's broken with your Gmail account, something like that. In cases like these, Googlers will do some monitoring to fix the problem and access your data in order to it, but we monitor and audit those very, very carefully. And since one of the most common questions folks ask is, well, who watches the watchers, or who audits the auditors? We actually have several different teams that are responsible for not just the dedicated auditing team, but a number of other security, fraud prevention, and abuse prevention teams that look for either inappropriate or unjustified accesses to user data. And we're always on the lookout for new signals and detection methods to find inappropriate access to user data. Third-party access, the summary of that is that Google does not sell your information except under certain circumstances that are outlined in the privacy policy, which I admit is not exactly beach reading, but you should read our privacy policy sometimes because it really tells you in detail what we do and don't do with your user data. Last, about data removal or deletion. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that I don't look like I have time to get into, but if you're a privacy geek like me, it actually is really interesting the way data goes from being deleted to actually removed from our servers. And like I said, all of this is about Google, not other companies. I can't really speak for other companies, but hopefully they have good data practices as well. And last, in my last minute, I want to talk about the last little bit of the data life cycle. You either as a user or an IT professional. And as the Lawyer Cat disclaimer, these are my own suggestions for how you can protect your user data. First of all, ask questions. If you're downloading an app and it's asking for access to your camera or location information, does it really have a good reason to be asking for that information? Sometimes yes, sometimes maybe no. Be smart about who you give your data to. If somebody, just a random person on the street said, hey, I'll give you $5 for your first name, last name, email address, zip code, and phone number, would you necessarily do that? Well, depends on what they're going to use it for. Same way, think about when you give your personal information, what they're going to be using it for. Lastly, take control. There's a lot of great tools out there, like Google's privacy checkup tool and Facebook's timeline review tool, just to name a couple. And with that, I just want to leave you folks with, even though some of the personal information has been a little bit difficult to control, make privacy happen and take control of your own information. Thank you very much.